Okay guys, Timmy coming at you again. Today what we're going to do is I'm going to talk to you about the functions of the lymphatic system. Now, lymphatic system is really important, and I'll tell you why. So here we go. Now look, for the most part, wherever you have arteries and veins, you have lymphatic vessels. So think of lymphatic vessels as kind of like the sewer system of the body. So watch. We talked about the cardiovascular system, and we have the arterial end of the capillary. And it's going to bring fluid and nutrients down to the cells of the body. And because it's under pressure, sometimes, well not sometimes, all the time, that fluid will escape the cardiovascular system and end up in the interstitial space. And the only way that that fluid that has escaped the cardiovascular system can get back to into the cardiovascular system is if it's drained by the lymphatic system. So let's see a smaller diagram of my little stupid Timmy drawings here. If you look, remember you have the arterial end of the capillary and the venous end of the capillary. And the arterial end of the capillary is always under pressure. So what that does is that tends to force fluid out of the capillary and then into the interstitial space. Now, if that fluid remains there, then that area is going to begin to swell. So this is how you get edema. And remember that most people are upright depending on their profession. So the only way that you can get that fluid that has escaped the cardiovascular system back into the cardiovascular system is through the lymphatic system. So that excess fluid then gets drained into lymph vessels. And you should write this down. All lymph vessels dump their lymph into the right side of the heart. So all lymph vessels drain their lymph into the right side of the heart, just like all veins of the body dump their venous blood into the right side of the heart. So all the lymph vessels that collected that excess lymph fluid will then meet and dump their fluid into the right side of the heart. So that's one of the big functions of the lymphatic system, to drain excess fluid and small proteins and stuff that have escaped the cardiovascular system and then bring it back to the right side of the heart. And remember that all veins of the body dump their venous blood in the right side of the heart, just like all lymph vessels dump their lymph into the right side of the heart. So that's a big function. The second function of the lymphatic system is critical. So a couple of terms you should be familiar with. The immune system is intimately involved in protecting us. And immunity literally means protection. So let's say you catch a case, right? And if the prosecutor says you're immune from prosecution, that means you're protected. So the same applies to the human body. So the immune system protects you. Then there's another term, phylaxis. Phylaxis means protection. And if you are prophylaxis, then you're for protection. If you're anaphylaxis, then you're without protection. Or another way of looking at that is a total body allergic reaction. I'm sure at some point you probably heard of anaphylactic shock. And that's essentially a total body allergic reaction. Now, a couple of other terms you need to know. Antigen. An antigen is anything that produces an immune response. Watch. You're working with a piece of wood and a sliver gets stuck through your finger. That is not you, and that will produce an immune response. So an antigen is anything that produces an immune response. And this differs from a pathogen. A pathogen is an antigen that produces disease. A sliver is not going to give you disease, right? The bacteria that's on the sliver, maybe. But again, a pathogen, anything that produces disease. And then you have an antibody. And an antibody is a chemical that's produced by cells of the immune system that destroys a specific antigen. And I need to say this a million times. It's specific. So you have floating around in your blood and lymphatic system millions and millions of different antibodies. Each one is specific for a specific antigen or thing that you've been exposed to in your life. Now, I just want to say one more thing. Well, two more things. Now watch. One of the general ways that your immune system protects you is by producing inflammation. Inflammation protects you. And I'll talk more about that later. So one of the primary functions of the immune system, the primary functions, is to produce inflammation. Inflammation is a generalized response, and I'll explain more about that later. So if you have a condition that is producing kind of uncontrolled inflammation, for example, rheumatoid arthritis, right? Then you are given medicines, steroids, and the steroids suppress the immune system and therefore suppress inflammation, because the primary function of the immune system is to produce inflammation. So that's a big function. The final function of the immune system really is pretty basic, and we learned about this when we learned about the digestive system. You have lymph vessels in your small intestines. Actually, you have the lymphatic system. 70% of your entire lymphatic system is within your GI tract. And obviously that kind of makes sense, because where do you get a lot of bad stuff? You eat a lot of bad stuff, right? And the biggest opening you have is your pie hole. So a lot of bad stuff can get in there. So you have this thing called a lacteal that's embedded in the villus of the small intestines. And this lacteal is involved in the absorption of fat and cholesterol from the GI tract. So those are the three big functions of the lymphatic system. So again, let's look at this really quickly and let's review. So, one, the lymphatic system will drain any excess fluid or small proteins that have escaped the cardiovascular system. And remember, all lymph vessels drain their lymph into the right side of the heart. So if you were to compare lymph vessels to arteries or veins, they are much more similar to veins. There's no pressure in the lymphatic system. Lymphatic vessels have one-way valves, just like veins do, only lymph vessels have more one-way valves. The largest veins are deep inside muscle, so lymph fluid gets back to the right side of the heart through muscle contraction and breathing. And they're involved in the absorption of fat and cholesterol from the GI tract. And then, as I explained to you, they're heavily involved in the immune system, right? And again, the immune system protects you. So those are the basic functions of the lymphatic system, and those are the functions that you should become familiar with.